I'm Ben Arendt, author of Amazon bestseller, How to Suck Less as a Manager, a practical guide to making your team less miserable today. I'm also the founder of Depth Charge Consulting. We work with executives all around the C-suite, helping leaders lead, organizations deal with change and disruption, and managers find their inner great manager.
Okay, very good. What did you do before Depth Charge?
So I've been a corporate consultant for about 10 years in places like CEB, Gartner, Challenger. Dominic, I saw that you're a former sales guy, if not still a sales guy.
Yeah.
So that's my world. I love talking to sales leaders. And then before that, I actually worked for the CIA for 5 years, where I was a White House briefer at one point.
Aha. But that's not a secret. That's okay to tell people.
It's okay to tell people that, yeah.
You weren't a spy.
What I try not to tell people is that I'm originally from Florida, so I can barely read and write. But, if that comes out, that comes out. Apparently, you don't need to do that to write a book. Go figure.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. What made you want to write this book?
I've always wanted to put a book together selfishly, because it's, I feel like as folks in our lives, we have all these milestones and things that we want to accomplish at some point before we move on to the next big adventure. I said to myself, if I'm going to do it, I need to find something that's important, that I'm passionate about, and that I think I have something kind of like a different perspective to share. I want to be clear. The book is about management. I don't consider myself the best manager in the world, but I care a lot. And I've had the chance to learn from a lot of people, both really good managers and really bad managers over the years. And through those lessons, I've also seen that every organization I've been to, both as a consultant, as a trainer, and as somebody working internally, people are making the same mistakes and have been for decades. So for me, this was an attempt to just say, hey, let's do better at this. You don't have to be perfect, but you do need to be a little bit better. Here are some really practical ways to do it. And hopefully somebody somewhere is able to make their team have a little bit better of a workplace environment as a result.
Fab. So how many, 5, 7, 14, how many rules or life lessons did you conjure into being?
So, there's 10 chapters in the book, but, one of the things I always am skeptical of is any kind of process or methodology or framework that's really dogmatic. Everybody's different. There's an infinite number of variables for any situation. The way my approach to this is, hey, you're probably going to have different strengths and weaknesses. Figure out what you need. So I have 10 chapters that are broken up into everything from how do I communicate better to how do I plan better to how do I understand all of my emotional issues that are causing me to blow up at people on my team or lose my cool? And then my goal is let people self-select within each of those one of up to 5 different specific activities that they can do to try to work on that problem.
Okay. Where should we dive in? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I think my favorite, it's funny. I was catching up with a friend of mine who's a C-suite executive now. I'm not going to say where, but it's a decent company, mid-sized. And early in his career, he and I were talking about management. And actually, as a result of this conversation, there's a lesson in the book.
Right.
And this guy's a genius. He's a brilliant researcher, brilliant analyst. I don't think he'd mind me saying any of those things, or that he also was a pretty crap manager. And he had a reputation for it. People were leaving his team. And he's a really nice guy. So you got to wonder, what's the disconnect here? And at the point where he and I chatted about this, even though I was not nearly as senior as he was or well known for effective work, I had a reputation for bringing in people, motivating them, and getting them back on track in terms of their career. So he said, hey, what should I do with my team? And I said, okay, well, look, here's the people on your team. You got Jimmy, and what's really important to him is he has the side business where he makes, this is true, sweaters for cats.
Right.
So, that's important to him. And then you got, Ashna, and I know she's got a new kid. So what's really important to her is time off and making sure she has work-life balance. And he goes, whoa, hold on. Why do I care about Jimmy's cat sweater business? And okay, the reason you care is because that's what he cares about. Because at the end of the day, whatever you're doing with him, he's thinking about that as his next big goal, his next big entrepreneurial activity. The reason he's here at this consulting organization, he's trying to learn more about business so that he can be a better entrepreneur himself. And the guy I was talking to says, I didn't know that. I'm like, yeah, because you actually have to care about your people and understand them to motivate them. And he looked at me.
Or even have to pretend to care at least.
Yeah.
So you're going to ask the question.
even just, like get like an AI to hello, what are your hopes and dreams? So it's simple. Be curious, because as soon as you know that, you now know what's going to motivate them. So for example, in the case of Ashna, she has a new kid. She's not looking for a promotion. She's looking for your help creating a work-life balance situation. And that's how you get the best productivity out of her. With Jimmy and his cat business, he's going to put in the extra hours if he believes that what he's doing is going to give him some kind of useful skill that he can take to the bank and use later on. So by aligning people's career goals, their development opportunities to the things that they actually care about, they stay longer, they work harder, and you have much less strange conversations at parties about being surprised that the people on your team have side businesses making pet clothes.
And if you ever do the Gallup Q12, when there's the question, somebody at work seems to care about me, your team will give you a 5 out of 5. And when we pull that data out, you look like you're a good manager.
It's true. And it's funny too, Dominic. I know we mentioned briefly, we both have a shared background as a sales leader. Talking to sales leaders, I get some of the biggest pushback on this because, like, hey, I don't care what they do in their spare time. I just need them to bring in more money. Like, but unfortunately, what they do in their spare time is impacting their ability to drive revenue, right? Like if let's take another team I was working with. Manager has a specific framework that he wants everybody to use, and he's really driving it. And he can't understand why he's got this one employee that is really struggling with it. And if I think about that employee, I just had a conversation with them. I say, hey, what's on your plate right now? Well, we've got 3 new tech tools. There's this new process that my boss wants me to take on. I'm a single parent, so I'm not getting a lot of sleep. And I have these 3 deals that I've been forecasting for 6 months. It was 4, but one of the companies just got acquired and that deal just fell through. So now I have all this much more pressure on these 3 deals, and I have to pretend in each conversation that everything's fine so that I can connect with my prospects. And if you talk to this person, you realize it's not that they're not following your process because they don't care. Their brain is oversaturated. So there are
Yeah.
things that you could do with them to help remove parts of that, to make it easier for them, to show that you care, that would enable them to unlock attention and focus on something else.
Maybe even help them get one of those deals over the line.
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah.
That's what we need.
Yeah. And when when you said this to your friend, though, what did he do with it? Did he say, yeah, Ben, that's great for you, thanks, and do nothing? Or did he do?
This is the friend who I told that you actually have to care about the people you work for
Yeah.
you. He did more of the AI, like, hello, what are your hopes and dreams, as I predicted he would. But he actually did start to understand how to foster connection between people. And I'm happy to say that today, look, he's an executive, so clearly his career is doing pretty well. And from what I understand, the people who work for him at least tolerate him as a leader. So I think he took it to heart. Look, it's not going to be easy or intuitive for everyone to do those things, but you can try, and sometimes just trying is enough so that people know you're trying.
Yes. What else you got? What else? That's brilliant. What else you got in there? What other gems do you have hiding in this book of yours?
Well, it's funny. I was having I love sales leaders. I talk to, that's my main client right now, so I'm always
Yeah.
going back to them. But I also love them because they have the most skepticism. And I was trying to give the friend of mine, this is, who you are if you're listening, some pro bono advice. He's like, man, everything's changing. We got a different market environment. Like, I can't deal with it all. My people are getting burnt out. We're just working so hard. How do I help people adapt to this change? And this comes up in the book. My recommendation is, in order to be able to adapt more effectively and deal with changing environments, disruption, you actually have to teach people how to recharge themselves.
Yeah.
I think more and more we're realizing in 2024 and the years around us that engagement, mental well-being, emotional well-being are actually things that contribute to somebody's ability to function and perform at work. And there are times where I'll go to teams and explain, hey, I know you think working 60 hours a week and breaking your back, or 80 hours a week, is going to help you. But in actuality, you're becoming less productive the more you work. What you really need to do is find a way to not just endure everything, but take a break, recharge, do something else, and regain your cognitive strength that enables you to focus, to use your subconscious effectively to find new pathways to solutions, that kind of thing. So I have these very fluffy conversations with sales leaders about, have you thought about taking a walk in the park? Or, take an hour off and maybe go and spend some time with one of your kids and, play with that new train set you got them, and then come back and worry about your forecast for the next month.
Yes. We had a business, Pier 1 in Southampton, and we had a pool table there. The idea was, I'd read the research that says, every 15 minutes in the hour, take a break. You're more productive for the next hour than, you work, you'll get more outcome than if you work the 2 hours straight through. I remember we had a client visit us and he said, "What's the rules for the pool table?" And I'm like, "Well, it's on the wall, you only get one shot on black." And he said, "No, I don't." He said, "I don't." He said, "That's not what I mean." He said, "Like, when can people use the pool table?" I'm like, "I don't know. Whenever they like. That's, if whenever they like." And he's like, "Well, how come people don't come in and just play pool all day?" Oh, well, because they get fired.
Yeah.
Like, they're grown-ups. And he's like, "Oh." And we used to have the same thing. We had a fridge full of beer, and people would say, "What's to stop people taking beer out the fridge at 9 o'clock in the morning?" So, well, that would be weird, wouldn't it? Like, wouldn't that be weird if you were sitting at your desk at 9 o'clock in the morning drinking a can of beer? Wouldn't somebody notice? And they're like, "Oh no." People have got this sort of, if you give people an opportunity to take the piss, they, you know, you just can't trust anybody. So you can't put temptation in front of them. And I just find it fascinating. You end up writing rules for the 2% of miscreants rather than the 98% of people who are going to be pissed off that you had a rule that said they couldn't play pool when they had nothing else to do, and that would be really helpful. I don't know, it's just really funny. Yeah, have you got any thoughts on in the book, or even just not in the book? But I was talking there about that. You'd said walk in the park. Why are people against things like a walk in the park or playing pool? Why do you think people can't see the value in that?
I love the point you made about this idea. Well, what do you mean? Why would they drink beer at 9 a.m.? They have work to do. Or why would they play pool? But that's probably because you don't suck as a leader, Dominic. Like, you trust people, right? Now, we trust people with a caveat, right? Like, at the end of the day, if I'm hiring somebody, and hiring's not cheap, you're paying a lot of money for recruiting, for advertising, you're interviewing people, you're spending a lot of time onboarding them. Presumably, you think that they're probably decent at some job. My recommendation, and this is what I've learned from leaders I've experienced in both ways and interviews, is lead with trust. Assume that that person is an adult, knows how to handle themselves, and put the ball in their court. Hey, here's the output that I need from you. Again, if we go back to sales, it's easy because it's what's the revenue you have to bring in. But in pretty much every part of a business that we're in, there's some kind of quantifiable output that we can look for, whether it's an OKR or some kind of specific metric. Now, that does put a little more onus of burden on you as a manager to be really specific and concrete about what you're looking for, which, by the way, is the number one step I suggest to start ending micromanagement, is just set really clear expectations about what you want, and then leave it up to the person working for you to get there. If they can't, if they show that they won't, then it's a conversation of, is this person right for my team? Is this person right for the job? But most of the time, they're going to want to succeed, and you'll find that they will come up with a expeditious way to do it that makes sense for their skill set. The one other tip I have in there is, if you're somebody who has low trust, or who is skeptical, or you haven't had this person proven to you yet, be really clear about what you need to feel confident about the work they're doing. So, for example, you could say, "Hey, I need you to check in with me once a week." Or, "Hey, before you go deliver this to my boss, can you let me know at least the talking points of what you're going to speak about?" But be clear about what you need, be clear about what they need, and then give them the agency to try to do it. That's not only how you get the best productivity, but that's how you keep people longer. Your hypos crave autonomy. And the number one thing, or one of the number one things that pushes away your best people, is micromanaging them.
Well, I think one of the things that people Oh, you see, delegation.
Yeah.
Delegation sucks because in most cases, what we're doing is we're going, I've got this job to do, Ben, and I'm going to get you to do it, and you're not going to do it as well as me. So I'm going to have to be all over you like a rash because I know you're not as good as me at it. And frankly, I haven't got the time or I can't be bothered to work out. So my job has always been, I've got this job that needs to do, and I need to hire somebody who is good enough so that I don't have to care or worry about the outcome because they've got it. And they love doing it more than me. But your point about the expectation, I think, is really interesting, because I think what people do is they not only say what the outcome is, but they also have an unsaid expectation about how it will get done.
Yeah.
And so quite often those new managers, somebody's done a thing and they're like, oh, but you didn't do it the way I would have done it. But they're never going to do that. They're not you. They're going to do it their way. You just need to worry about the outcome.
You know, you and I were talking about this before, I think before we started recording. It's just, why are we still writing books about management? Like, it's been decades, and yet we're still doing the same things. There's still micromanagement. There's still a complete lack of trust, of transparency about expectations. I love this statistic. There was a Gallup poll that found 82% of people in people leadership roles, like, you know, managing people, don't have particularly good skills at leading people. What other job do you know of where only fewer than 1 in 5 people is actually good at their job?
Well,
meteorologist? I don't know.
Well, you see, one of the things is when you were talking about your friend in sales that ending up at the C-suite,
yeah,
he's in an interesting position in his organization, because particularly in sales, but probably in other roles as well, you get promoted for being competent at the thing that you used to do, right? So I used to be a salesperson, I become a sales manager. I'm competent as a sales manager, I become a sales director. When he becomes head of sales, he now has to collaborate with the C-suite. And often people go all the way up and never learn how to collaborate. And there's an entire new thing up there when you become at the top of the tree, which is collaborate, which is, I find myself working with clients who are in that position. You know, I see these leaders of successful businesses, but they're like 7-year-olds playing soccer. You know, like, I've scored 2 goals, Ben. Yes, but the team lost 5-2. Yeah. You know, and it's just like, no. So I find that fascinating. But it's that promote people because they were good at the thing. I think that's where the challenge is. You go, you're Ben, you're a great sales guy. We'll make you the next sales manager because we're not going to train you. There's no plan. We're not even going to buy you a book. We're not even going to buy you how to suck less at being a manager. We're just going to promote you.
Or if we do train you, it's how do you write a performance review? How do you use our administrative system? How do you not harass people or be biased so we don't get sued? But there's never hey, 2 people on your team are having a fight. How do you deal with it? You know, because that happens all the time, right? Your personalities clash, and then you got to be the manager. And unfortunately, it is your problem because it's going to bleed over into other people in the team. You can't just say, I don't know, you guys work it out. It doesn't work that way.
Have you got kids?
The first one's on the way in about 2 months.
Okay. That's not going to change your life.
Speaking of adapting to disruption, right?
Well, because I often find that people who, they go, all of this bringing up children thing, that's what I wish I'd known when they'd made me a manager. Because the 4-year-old behaving badly, that's what I wish I'd known, because that's really helpful. And so, it's that sort of school of life thing.
There were so many times writing the book, but also having conversations with other leaders where you can't help but reflect on, things like reflective listening or apologizing effectively when, inevitably you're going to lose your cool or something's going to happen that you're not proud of. How do you apologize in a way that's validating and helps the other person move on? Yeah, that's parenting stuff. It's really similar. The key is when you're becoming a parent, usually, hopefully, you're making a decision, hey, I want to undertake this really drastic change. But in our corporate business world, what you said is exactly true. Usually, if you're becoming a people leader, it's not because you love leading people or you want to suddenly make your focus about helping the people under you thrive instead of you getting all the credit. It's because it's the next rung on your career. Yeah. And you kind of have to. And that's a terrible mentality. Your people at most organizations are by far your most expensive and most important asset. I always equate it. You wouldn't give a stranger the keys to your Lamborghini if you didn't verify that they actually know how to drive first, right? And then when they crash into a wall, you're like, "Hey, well, what did that happen?" Well, actually, I've never driven a car in my life. I don't know what I'm doing. Let's check these people and make sure that they are ready to do this. They want to take on the responsibility.
Also, there's something came up as a result of sort of return to work post COVID. I was talking to Nick Marks at Friday Pulse, and he said there's an interesting thing about human psychology, which is any human being could tell you like 10 reasons why they're not going to like a thing, right? And they'll feel it, but they can't put themselves in a position to tell you why they're going to like it. So, so if you do a survey and say, "Hey, everybody, would you like to come back to the office?" Like, people are just going to say no, because they can feel the change. Oh, I've got used to being at home 5 days a week. Now I'm not going to be. I'm antsy about the change. I can't think how I'm going to enjoy it. So the same is true for management. Quite often, I've seen people think they're going to like it, think they're going to enjoy it, and then it turns out that they don't, because they were very good at what they did, and now they suck at this thing, and they don't get any joy out of it. But we also don't allow them to. There's no way to go back. And so you end up losing them.
Well, first of all, we've been comparing management to parenthood. I hope that's not the case with parenthood. But all right. So everybody loving their kids, wink, wink aside. There's actually one company I worked with maybe about a decade ago. I'll keep it anonymous, but it was a Fortune 100, so a really big company.
Yeah.
They actually had a program that we profiled back when I was at CEB, where they would let aspiring managers do a rotation for 3 months.
Yeah.
Now, that's not necessarily the best thing in the world for teams if they have a manager coming in and moving. But, maybe somebody goes on parental leave, or maybe somebody takes a sabbatical. They bring in kind of one of these apprentice managers. But at the end of that 3 months, there's a choice. Do you want to go back to an individual contribution role, or do you want to stay a people leader? And what they found was a shocking number of people self-selected out of management. And I think, which is exactly what we want. Like to the point we're talking about, not everyone is suited for it. Some people may find out that they actually quite like it, or that they're willing to put in the time and effort to get better at it. But I think we have to stop taking it for granted that this is a part of everyone's career journey, and creating a separate track for people who are probably not going to be great at this, or who aren't going to enjoy it. And a separate track for people like Dominic, maybe you and me, who really get a lot out of helping other people achieve the things that they want to achieve.
I'm not going to ask you this. I was going to say, who's your worst boss? But you don't need to name him or her. But did some of your relationship with your worst boss make it into the book? And if so,
absolutely.
If so, how?
Oh my gosh. I mean, how could it not? Well, it's funny. I don't know if you noticed, as soon as you asked that question, I started shaking my head. There was so another statistic from Gallup. They looked at how much impact do managers have on your well-being. And they compared it to doctors, therapists, friends, parents. They actually found that managers have as much impact on your well-being as your partner.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Spend a lot of time with them.
You spend a lot of time. You don't have a choice. You have to. Now, if my partner's listening, I have every choice, and I enjoy all of my time with her, sincerely. But it's true. You're kind of a hostage to these people. You spend a ton of time with them. And, every time I ask the question, "Hey, have you had a bad manager?" I've never had anyone say no, and I've never had anyone not have a huge reaction. In my case, there's been a few. One that sticks out to me, mostly just because there's something actionable about it. You always have the people who could be a Disney villain, and you wonder how they... The parent thing, I have people who are so toxic. I wonder, man, what must it be like to be your kid? Like, what hell is that person living at home for your, micromanagement, neurotic, mean? But anyway, the one I learned a lot from, I had a manager who probably shouldn't have been a manager, really brilliant engineering type. This is when I was working with heads of IT and CIOs. And this person was very, very much an introvert, really liked to do internal focus, deep thought. And then anytime interacting with someone else, would present a fully baked out idea that had thought through all the assumptions and possibilities and scenarios. Well, Dominic, I don't know if you can tell, I'm the exact opposite. I'm an externalizer. I'm an ideas guy. I like to throw things out. Very different. I like to think that I still come up with good conclusions and outputs and products, completely different style. And this person, I think I was their nightmare. Because they would come to a meeting and they would, here's my thing, here's what I suggest, and here's what we're going to do. And I'd say, oh, I got this idea. And, what do you think about this? And they, over time, interpreted that as that I was lesser or stupid. And I started getting the situation where they would ignore me. And it wasn't fun for anyone until one day we were in a meeting with a senior stakeholder who asked a question that my then boss hadn't prepared for. And my boss, came up with an idea, but kind of then shut down. And I started, spitballing because that's what I'm used to. And he tried to shut me down in front of the senior leader. And the leader said, hey, hold on. I think he's onto something. And brainstormed with me. And 10 minutes later, we had an awesome solution. I ended up winning an award for some kind of analysis. And I don't know if the leader learned anything at that point, but what I certainly learned is how you communicate and take on information can drastically create friction or connection between people. And it's really important as a leader to be aware of that, both so that you don't give people this situation where they can't win and they can't communicate, but also so you can help people unlock what they're good at. So they're doing more for you and they're doing more output and more productivity.
Yes, because it's just that, narrow-minded power thing, can't share it. Otherwise he could have made himself look good by having you on his team.
Right.
And then you'd have both got something out of it. Just shouldn't have been a manager. But when you were talking about terrible bosses, I used to work with a guy and we used to joke and I used to say, what must it be like to be his kid?
Yeah, right.
Like, like you're 6 and you bring home a drawing and you're like, Dad, look at this. You call that a drawing? You're a retard.
Yeah.
Just
spits coffee on it.
Terrible. This guy was just awful and mean and horrible to people all the time. He was the CEO of the business. And it was just like, man, you're so mean. And he would talk about his kids and you just think, I bet your kids, either you're Jekyll and Hyde or your view of your world is, because you think you're an amazing CEO of this business and you're not. So maybe your view of parenting is the same.
Well, I was just curious, was he a good leader? Like, was the company, other than being a toxic person, was the company doing well?
No, it was doing okay. It was more sort of financial. I mean, they had a value which was excellence. And I said in the executive management meeting, I said, look, we need to think about our values here because they're not worth having unless they're authentic. And you've got this one here, which is excellence. And there's nothing excellent about anything in this entire company. I think maybe we should change it to frugality. I said, no, I'm being nice because I think actually you're just mean. But, we could call it frugality and then we could make it a virtue as opposed to just being penny pinching. Deadly silence. But anyway, by then I knew I was going, so it didn't matter.
Might as well. I mean, it's so again, writing this book on career management, I tell people, don't look at the product a company makes or the mission. Also think about what's the culture like, who are the people you'll be working with. What is it you're trying to get out of, the next couple years that you're going to be spending there? One of the pieces of advice I have is go look at a company's values. And then in your interview, ask them how that comes into play. Because the answer will tell you a lot. Like, is the value just window dressing? Is it something that they're just saying because they have to put something out? Or is there actually something interesting? I worked at a company once where we had generosity as a value. And every quarter, they gave an award about somebody who spent time or effort helping themselves or a client or a team. It came up in every conversation. And that tells you a lot about what they emphasize. But if it's just window dressing, they probably haven't actually had the internal conversations like what you're talking about to reflect, do we actually care about this? What does it mean? What, so to your point, excellence, like what's the alternative?
What is it? Well, you were saying earlier about hating your kids. And I was talking to some people at my children's school about, the school has a strategy. And they said, it's your children are at the heart of everything we do. I said, that's not really a strategy because the alternative isn't true. And everybody also says it. So unless over here we have Ryanair, who are, world famous for hating their passengers, so unless you're the Ryanair schools, like we hate your children more than you do, it's not it's not really a strategy to say the same as everybody else. And so often, I mean, I was just laughing because I'm thinking back to Rackspace where, you know, to deliver fanatical support, you must have been, you know, insane. And so the number one award, which didn't actually get given every month, was you were the, you know, that you were the most fanatical employee in the business. And you would get put in the straitjacket and your photograph would taken and be hung on the wall. And that was the number one, like that was the number one accolade because you were voted for by the rest of the team. But management made sure that, you know, the award wasn't being devalued. And then there are other clients where I meet them and cool. I say, you know, I said, you know, have you got core values? And they say, yeah, we've got core values. I say, how many have you got? And they go, do we have 4 or do we have 5? And you go, okay, well, you know, can you remember 3 of them? And they go, no. And you just, you know, to your point, they thought it was a good idea to do core values, but they didn't do anything with them. So they may as well not. You know, they haven't designed a culture.
Which if you don't, it'll design itself for you. By the way, the straitjacket, I love that example. I mean, that immediately, if I was applying to a company, so if they're still out there listening, what does that tell you? They're playful, they're self-aware, but they're still dedicated, but it's okay to laugh and have fun and at the same time work hard. Like I absolutely love that. The other thing I'll say, Ryanair, if that's Ryanair calling to see if we're available, we are available, Ryanair. If you got the dollars, we're happy to consult you and make a better culture.
But I love it. I read the CEO. I read his autobiography last year, and you know, deliberately playful, right? So. Yeah, I remember watching in the US, seeing a Ryanair story on CNN because it was alleged that Ryanair were going to start charging you €1 to use the toilet on their planes. And, you know, then they did another one, which was no seatbelts and standing room at the back third of the plane, standing room only with, you know, like you're on the tube. And so people are going, this is outrageous. You know, like, what if it crashes? He goes, if you crash, you're all dead. So it doesn't matter. Right, just like totally deadpan and playful into the leaning into the whole you know, we hate our passengers thing. And but then, you know, being the most successful airline in Europe, you know, they just keep people. He said, look, we might tell people we don't like them, but they keep coming back because it's cheap. That's how, and it's a strategy.
And at least you know where you stand. I guess I think your point about authenticity, I know this is a topic that comes up a lot on this podcast. People will know when you're faking it. And if you keep faking it, you're gonna nuke their desire for trust or to believe you. So look, if your only goal is just have a transactional relationship, well, at least just be honest about it. Don't try to pretend you're something you're not. But I love that. And again, Ryanair, if you're out there, great job. But if you need consulting on culture, I am available as long as I can take a different airline to get to you.
Quickly, your best manager. What tips from your best manager make it in?
My favorite tip is invite skepticism and invite disagreement. My favorite manager would say, okay, here's the problem. Here's what I'm thinking is a solution. Tell me why I'm wrong. And that takes guts and it takes the willingness to be vulnerable, but also an acknowledgement that he had us on his team because he believed that we had something useful to add. Mm-hmm. And inevitably, he might not have always taken the advice that we gave, but by inviting it, whatever we ended up with, I felt ownership over.
Yes.
And he could be that much more confident that it was going to be pressure tested. Like too often, you know, leaders, especially, you know, entrepreneurs just starting out, they think they have to be the smartest guy in the room. Like you don't. You have to find the best solution that's going to guide your business. It's okay if it's somebody else's idea. So ask, because somebody else might have a better perspective than you do.
Yeah, I feel that those startups are like basketball, and often the founders are smarter than everybody else in the room. But then the game changes definitely at about 70 people. You've got to be playing soccer, not basketball. And the whole, you go from being, you could add another smart person into the room, and at basketball or at startup stage, it'll make a difference. But the data from European football leagues is you add a superstar to a team and it's less impactful than how poor your weakest player is, because your weakest player will make a mistake, and that gifts the opportunity to the opposition. So it's just fascinating because people are on this trajectory. Like here we are, we started it, and then all of a sudden it's like the whole game changes, and they don't understand why they slam into a wall. They start off by doing everything we did before. Well, let's do more of it, and it still doesn't make any difference.
Dominic, I even your hand gesture to show the growth line for those listening is exactly what I typically talk about with leaders, because I've worked with so many startups that have a great idea. They grow really fast because there's early adopters and low-hanging fruit. And then when it comes time to scale the business and all those low-hanging fruit are plucked, they find out that it's a completely different skill set than being an evangelist and selling an idea. Suddenly you have to create scale, you have to create systems, you have to create repeatable processes and margin and profitability. And if you aren't the best leader in the world and don't have every skill set, it's going to be hard to admit, I no longer have all of the tools that I need to do this. Let me find somebody who knows how to do this.
Yes. And the game's completely changed. And so
Completely.
if you're not self-aware enough, which is what we were talking about, right at the beginning before recording, it's like that self-awareness is absolutely key to being a manager or a leader or scaling a business or whatever. What books, other than How to Suck Less as a Manager, what else is on your bookshelf? What should people read?
Well, I know you guys talked about Measure What Matters a couple of podcasts ago.
Yeah.
I love that one because I think, first of all, I'm a big OKR proponent. Part of why is because it creates transparency. So for those that don't know, OKRs is a way to plan strategically that relies on very specific measurable objectives and outcomes. What that forces you to do is have conversation about what's important and what's not. So you're prioritizing, and then create numbers so you know what success looks like and how you're on the right path, so that everyone has the same perspective on what you're aiming toward. And I think at the root of a lot of crappy leadership, crappy management, and disconnect is different expectations or understanding. So Measure What Matters, I love. The other one I recommend a lot is Difficult Conversations by Stone, Patton, Heen, and Fisher. It's been around for about 15 years. When I was in grad school back in the day, I took a conflict management course, which at the time I thought was the softest, fluffiest stuff. And it ended up being something that I've used pretty much every day. And what this book forces you to do is think about yourself, that self-awareness piece that we were just talking about. What gets you going, what gets you annoyed, how you communicate, how you think. So if for nothing else, it forces you to improve your metacognition, your awareness of who you are, and make that a better input to how you lead.
On the OKRs thing, I had Josh Seiden and Jeff Gothall on, and they wrote a great book called Who Does What by How Much. That's now my favorite OKRs book. And
that's on my, so to those authors, after listening to the podcast, that's on my order. So I'll be reading that. So Dominic, if you have me back in a few months, I'll talk about that too.
And I don't know if they've been on the podcast as well. Karen and David, they wrote Powerful Phrases for Dealing with Workplace Conflict. That sounds so like good. So the idea being that you're all going to get into conflict at some point or other, which is what you said, but you'd feel less uncomfortable about getting into it if you felt you could get out of it. So the whole idea is, here's the how to get out of it manual so that you feel able to get into it more. That's really good as well. I like that. They were good. They were great guests. What else you got? You got a big bookshelf behind you. What else you got?
Honestly, I mean, this is mostly for show. Like I said at the beginning, I'm from Florida. I don't know, Dominic, if you're aware with the. By the way, this is an ongoing joke. So if I have any listeners from Florida, it's basically. Early on in my life. So I grew up in a military family. I lived all over the United States. But the state of Florida, Dominic, I don't know if you know this, has a little bit of a reputation for churning out hilariously stupid decisions.
Right.
So anytime anything goes bad, that's my fallback. Is it's like, hey guys, come on, like with this, I'm doing the best with what I was given.
Right. Look, let me jump into the quick fire round then. What drives you every day?
The opportunity to connect with people and help them achieve the things that they want to achieve.
What's your genius?
Understanding my own emotions and helping other people understand theirs.
Oh, nice. What unpopular opinion do you hold?
I actually don't think the Lord of the Rings movies were that great.
What's the most significant risk you've taken in your career?
I'm starting my business about 4 months ago and breaking away from the corporate world to try my own thing.
Okay. And your wife hasn't left you and you're still being able to feed yourself. That's all good.
I mean, I haven't been upstairs in a little bit, so it could have changed. But as of an hour ago, things were going pretty good.
Good stuff. How do you measure success?
I measure success based on the things that I personally want to achieve, and I spend time thinking specifically for every period of my life, what do I want to get out of it? So for right now, I want to learn about entrepreneurialism, and I want to learn how to become a writer who actually helps people do things with themselves and their careers.
Very good. What's the most recent thing you've learned or recent skill you've acquired?
Well, I actually, again, in preparation for being a parent, I took a infant and child CPR class about 2 nights
Right.
ago. So, so I'm just waiting for some small child to choke on something so I can give them the Heimlich and then resuscitate them.
Do you know the thing is when you end up with another one, you realize that you drop them and they bounce, and it's like much less scary than it is with the first one.
I mean,
It'll all be good.
that's what happened to me, and clearly I turned out okay.
What's your biggest source of inspiration?
People who don't complain and deal with their challenges and overcome adversity.
Okay. What's the biggest myth in business?
That the leaders actually know what they're doing and are smarter than everybody else.
That's one of the, I paraphrase Dan Sullivan and I say to my kids all the time, don't bring me something as a complaint. If I'm going to say one of these three things to you, think about it first. Life's not fair.
Yep.
So don't bring me anything where that's the answer. Nobody's in charge and all rules are just made up.
Yep.
So if you're going to come and complain about one of those three things, stop, don't bring it to me, because I'm going to just say to you, life's not fair, everything's made up, and nobody's in charge.
When you found out everything's made up, was it terrifying or was it enjoyable? It was a little bit of both for me.
Oh, you see, I think the fact that everything's made up is just brilliant, and that nobody's in charge, right? So, like my wife will say something to me and it feels like she's, there's some sort of deep conspiracy. I'm like, nobody's in charge. That's just incompetence.
Yeah.
You think they're way smarter than they're not that smart.
No.
I've met them. They're not. So, right. Brilliant. Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
Likewise, Dominic, thanks for having me.